Bonsoir, this is Benjamin, and I'm asking tonight, how can we save Welsh Devolution? And that's a loaded question, because it insinuates that it needs saving at all. And I'm not editing this much, this is just talking about politics and something that's very important to my country. And for those of you who don't know where I am, I'm in Wales, which is a nation within the state or union of the United Kingdom. Okay? And what devolution is, it's a set agreement of self-government that was established in 1999 after a vote a couple years earlier. Now, I just need to explain quickly what devolution is in addition. So from the year 1283 until the year 1999, we had no real self-government except for 4 years in the early 15th century. Owain Glyndŵr did establish a functioning Welsh state for 4 years. But that meant we had no right to make our own decisions and design, in a civic sense, our own country for 715 years or so. That's massive. So why then would I say that we need to save it? What is the threat to it? So first of all, I need to establish what that threat is. Okay, which I'll tell you here. Then why it exists, what can be done about it, and what we can do to address this. And this is an opinion of mine. There are people elsewhere in the world. And I also need to say why it's worth saving, frankly. So first of all, what are we trying to save devolution from? Now, in the last Senedd election, the Senedd is what we call it, our parliament, Senedd. In the last Senedd election, there's a party called Abolish the Welsh Assembly, which that in itself is an insult, because it's not called an assembly. And it was an assembly in 1999, but it was upgraded after votes for more powers by the people. But this Welsh Assembly Party, it got over 1%, which under a first-past-the-post system, that wouldn't really be a threat at all. But we don't exactly have a first-past-the-post system. We have a form of proportional representation. It's mixed. More things are coming in, but it means this Abolish the Welsh Assembly Party came very close to getting a regional seat, because we have direct constituencies and we have regional seats. Now the Lib Dems, basically what would this be in layman's terms? What are they? The Liberal Party, essentially. Kind of, not classical liberalism, but they're a social democratic progressivist liberalism. It's still liberalism, but it's an offshoot of it. Yeah? And they got 48,000 votes and were able to get a seat on the regional seat. The Abolish the Welsh Assembly Party got 41,000. They came very close, and they would have probably gotten it, but there were 3 parties that divided their vote. 4, actually, if you include the Conservatives. But let's go for the 3. Abolish the Welsh Assembly, Reform, and UKIP. And these are dangerous because several people in the UKIP group have talked about abolishing our parliament, our Senedd. Reform has come out against it at times. So they adamantly want to get rid of our existence. And I'll get to that as well, because our Senedd it saved us from extinction, basically. It avoided us the fate of Cornwall for every purpose. But these UKIPper people, they got 17,000, and the Reform people got 11,000. And this was on top of the Tories gaining ground in many areas. Now we need to address why this happened, and where are the Conservatives in this? The Conservatives campaigned against Welsh Devolution in the late 90s. They've campaigned against further powers each time, which isn't so bad in itself. We need an opposition voice, right? I'm not knocking that. But there are segments among them which are clearly anti-Welsh, despite really decent Conservatives like Sean Driscoll. Stephen Crabb is another good one, I think. Decent Conservatives. And they are now a marginal voice within their own party, because these anti-Welsh extremists and English nationalists have taken over. And that's not just bad for us in Wales, it's bad for the Conservative Party, because we need a centre-right voice of just calm moderation, slowing things down, giving people economic aspiration. We desperately need that, especially in Wales, as I'll get to. But we have seen chat groups and even some people openly within the Conservatives attacking Welsh devolution. Now, it's not their party policy, but you get surveys in email from them and asking what you think of matters, and getting rid of the Senedd is one of the options. So they're trying to test the waters. They're asking, do you want us to go a bit further and be anti-Welsh in some cases? Now, they won't see it as anti-Welsh. And there was a good, fine Tory who I greatly admired, David Melding, who understood this, that they don't see themselves as anti-Welsh, but they often are. And this man's conservatism, David Melding, his conservatism saw the Union for what's good about it, what we can love, what all our nations can contribute to it and get out of it. But an English nationalism swept over it after the Brexit vote. Which brings us to the UKIP movement and this Abolish the Welsh Assembly Party. Why are these forming? Where does it come from, and how do we stop it? So I would say the history of this actually begins with Margaret Thatcher. She brought in changes which were nothing less than a full-blown revolution. Some of them, frankly, yes, they were needed. Now, many won't agree with me, but you couldn't have the country paralyzed into paralysis by unions perpetually. And she stopped it. She also opened us up to Europe, which many Conservatives today won't like, but I admire her for. She also said to Argentina, "F off." Sinn Féin didn't like her. Sinn Féin don't like Jews, so I don't like Sinn Féin. But the point of bringing up Thatcher is that was the last time in Britain that there was a profound sea change in ethics, in what we value as a society. And that's been catching up with us recently. The hiccup, the quite uncomfortable one of 2016, which was shared in America with Trump, but we here, Brexit, that was a reaction against the economic neoliberal and globalist views that she endorsed. And that's very unsettling for conservatives. And they're not able to keep up with the truth of that. But other parties are. Enter UKIP, which evolved into Reform, which evolved. I mean, there's been several incarnations. Basically, slick oil salesmen with millions of rubles behind them. And this abolish the Welsh Assembly type groups often are offshoots of them indirectly, sometimes through discrete tax haven islands, which we can't completely trace. I mean, there's all kinds of loopholes in these. There's think tanks like Adam Smith, and there was a Welsh one. I don't even remember the name of it now, but Wales Focus Group or something, and it was basically pumping out anti-Welsh propaganda, and it wouldn't release where its funds came from. So we in Wales are facing an insurgency in England against this Thatcherite neoliberalism that conservatives in England are splitting two ways. Some of them are actually going back to being decent, good conservatives, which I respect. But another branch are flying off in tin hat foil hats against NATO and globalist agendas. We know that leads to anti-Semitism, don't we? We can't have that. No. But this lack of change means people need a scapegoat. Fortunately, we're not at the stage where they blame Jews yet. But if nothing has changed in Wales since 1999, it's quite an easier leap to blame Wales, if you're in Wales, than to blame this massive British state through which you feel a sense of identity and love. And so people have been whipped up by these think tanks and economic funds, accelerated by hive mind social media bubbles, turned into demonic trolls, losing their own humanity to see us into these desperate groups of animosity towards each other, Welsh or British, no in between. That's bad, not just for Britain and Wales, but democracy itself. We become more partisan. And we've had these UKIPers and that lot in our Senedd. It's a national shame. It's an embarrassment. No, I'm not anti-right wing. Not at all. But that's not right wing. It's just populist riffraff. If there were mad communists and they could get them a seat, they'd take them either way. They just want a quick ride. Quick buck, as they say in America. And the crux of the problem is that Labour has held power here, not since when devolution began, well, it has, but since 1922. It's been the dominant power in Wales. 101 years, and we are the poorest part of the United Kingdom, the valleys. Some of those upper crags are woeful in the lack of economic hope. The highest unemployment here, 5% in my area. That's quite average in Wales. Now that's not bad compared to some other nations, I'll grant, but for a stable liberal democracy as is known to be the brand of the United Kingdom, that's pitiful. That's a pitiful level of employment. And it stems from this Neo-Liberalism that means London is sucking up that wealth beautifully. But London may be the wealthiest city in Europe, but the far-flung lands beyond are the poorest in Europe. Not in Europe, but, well, Wales. We're poorer than most of France or Germany, whilst London is far ahead. And I don't blame London wanting wealth. It's just, if you're proud to be British, you cannot be proud of such disparity, because your own people are harmed by your choices. And so there's not really been any change since 1999. Labour have been in power all this time. And they've been in coalition with Plaid Cymru, but the problem is both of these parties are social democratic left-leaning. That means even if Plaid Cymru gets into power, though it may bring constitutional change as a nationalist party, the ethos does not change. The sense of your moral beliefs do not change. That's the problem. That's why over 50% of our people do not vote. Just look at this. Since devolution began, these are the numbers election by election of the people who actually even bothered to vote. 1999, 46.3% voted. 2003, 38.2% voted. That's quite bad. 2007, 43.7%. A bit better. 2011, 42.2%. 2016, 45.3%. 2021, 46.6%. That's awful. And then you get people like Adam Price suggesting that we should force people to vote. I don't think he understands how dangerous that is to protect Welsh devolution. Because if the government, I'm not really represented in my views entirely by the Tories or Plaid Cymru or Labour or Lib Dems. If the government forces people to vote, well, there's a good chance that a significant portion of that 55% are just going to put their two fingers up and vote for whoever is anti-Welsh devolution. Because they need someone to blame for the economic woe and the policies which are anti-aspirational, which are being passed after 25 years. I mean, I'm not being anti-Labour here. Heaven David, Labour guy for Caerphilly, he was absolutely right on that referendums are bad. And that we didn't need a referendum for bringing in the then Welsh Assembly and then upgrading powers, because it was in manifestos of these parties. That's how parliamentary democracy works. There are things I clearly agree on with some Labour people, just like some Tories. But no democracy functions long term if one party is in power. A century of Labour. So the voices wanting to push that out are growing around the periphery, but many of them can't simply turn to Plaid Cymru because that's offering constitutional change, not change of morality. It's offering a change of identity rather than a change of values. A democracy shifts political values every so often, and the values between Labour and Plaid Cymru are both centre-left. So if Plaid Cymru gets into power, it doesn't solve the problem that's causing people to become anti-Welsh devolution in the first place. Because those people feel that their values are never going to be heard in this country. Ever. Social democracy has been the dominant mode of belief since 1945. That will not last forever. And yes, whilst I agree with Plaid Cymru and Labour that the Neo-Liberalism offer doesn't work, I mean, we fully agree on that. They're not addressing aspiration and individualism. Maybe the Liberal Democrats could offer that, but they're going down the progressivist and group rights mode, which, again, leans into social democratic values, which means that all of those people who are turning to abolish the Welsh Assembly, reform, UKIP, and the wing which has taken over the Conservatives, their voices are not heard. Their values are not appealed to. They're called bigots. They're called racists. They're called ignorant. They're called stupid. They're made fun of on social media. So of course they turn against Welsh and the Welsh Senedd. Well, there only is one Senedd. I just don't need the Welsh in front of it, do I? So how do we solve this? Well, there are three parties at the moment which offer a shift that's possible toward a Wales first focus that's non-left. First of all, the Tories. The British Conservatives have absolutely the ability to turn into a Welsh party properly. They can do it. There are people in them that are good, decent Welsh people. Absolutely. They have the potential. But their raison d'etre at the moment seems to be defending English interests in Wales. English economic interests in Wales. And that bleeds into what I'm getting to in a moment, that it's the economic interest that we need to change. And that's the way to change it. But so long as we have Welsh Tories teetering on the brink of anti-devolution stances, they're not going to break through sitting on the fence. And sooner or later they're going to accept the truth. You're either with us in devolution or you're against us. There's no fence. Are you for a bit more Welsh devolution? Are you for more Welsh language and culture? Are you for us being different within His Majesty's United Kingdom? Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. Are you for that? Or are you against us being different? Are you against us having more power and laws? Are you against looking at us Welsh as an ethnicity with our own economic and cultural rights apart from England? Are you against all that? Well then, you're against devolution. And Tories are going to choose eventually. I think so. Or they'll gradually be replaced by one of these little pecker parties pecking at the back door. Abolish the Welsh Assembly are a bit, they're a bit crazy. But reform UKIP, these people have money and the backing of personality. When there's economic woe and our media is coming from England, they get propellers, inertia. And speaking of propellers, there was a smaller party, Propel, or rather Neil McAvoy was in Plaid Cymru. He kind of went a bit populist, and he's a flash image of all of these little seeds that are bursting up. Because people are looking for something that's not social, democratic, centre-left in Wales, that is a Welsh voice. And if they don't find it, eventually they could turn against Wales. That's the danger. This duopoly of Plaid Cymru and Labour, both being on the same page of the political book, centre-left, is damaging to our country. We need one of them to be offering points on the opposite position of economics. Not both of them on the same side of economics, or rather one on one side and one a bit further left on the same side, arguing over which version of the left is good for our country. That leaves out 30-40% of our country who want something else. And they could get lucky in a breakthrough on the wing of someone who offers them, look, devolution's not working because you never get heard. Now, we have the Lib Dems as well. But culturally, they've swung left. Like, further than Labour. So, I mean, don't get me wrong, I've campaigned for the Liberal Democrats in the past. I've been very pro-Europe. I adamantly agree on their stances of no ID cards, no government surveillance type stuff. Like, I really like the civil liberties and that kind of stuff. I'm really cool with that. But Lib Dems are not answering that. They're not answering the need to replace this neoliberal type Thatcherism that has created a technocratic bureaucracy type Labour, and that Plaid Cymru has kind of attached the side of that worldview through being a bit more radical in the identity politics and solidarity issues and that kind of thing. So they're not offering a true alternative. They could if they become more liberal. So how do we solve this? There's a new party, GLAD. Now, I don't agree with them on a few things. And they're not where I stand personally on matters like universal basic income. No. How can I word this? I respect what they're trying to do, which is create a non-left Welsh voice. Sorry. I respect what they're trying to do, which is create a non-left Welsh voice. But they're trying to do so without their base. So Labour formed with an industrial base originally, the worker party. That's changed into urban and upper middle class today, and the poor, which is what I'll get to in a moment. And Plaid Cymru, their base is clearly yr iaith Cymraeg, the Welsh language, which makes them vulnerable because the Tories clearly see that, by the way, so they just put in place policies which undermine. But GLAD are GLAD are trying to offer an answer, but they're missing the first step. You need a base. And so what I think needs to happen is we need to address the demographics that are allowing Labour to rule so long in the first place. The fact that they built themselves here in Wales off of what we in America call blue-collar jobs, working class jobs, and unions, those types of things. And then when the Neo-Liberalism revolution came, they forever latched themselves onto that as an enemy, which destroyed their communities. So that their politics now is often based on what they're against. It's almost entirely based on what they're against. I mean, Tony Blair tried to change it, but he only changed it by adopting the neoliberal revolution, which worked at the time. I mean, great leader, by the way, Blair, but he was just latching on to the revolution. And that's what a revolution is. When the opposition adopts elements of your ideology to survive, that's when a revolution succeeds. So, we need a new way of doing things in Wales, and what I need to say is we need to find a way to replace the demographics that are supporting the left-wing consensus and status quo in Wales. Not replace it, but just to allow us to have an alternative that is Welsh first, not anti-Welsh, not these crazy tin hat, lunatic, anti-globalist nonsense, right? But aspiration, economic aspiration. We need white-collar, professional jobs. We need finance jobs, technology, insurance, telecommunications. We need more of that kind of thing in Wales. Private enterprise, finance. I mean, that's what I was getting to earlier, the jobs. There are no decent jobs in Wales. And Labour and Plaid Cymru are able to use that time and time again to tap into resentment instead of offering economic aspiration. You can tell I'm a bit passionate about this. But go look at jobs in Wales. Call centre after call centre after call centre. Entry-level NHS job after entry-level NHS job. Administration. And those kinds of people, I mean, I've been that myself. I'm not disrespecting you. Please don't leave hate in the comments. Those kinds of people are going to naturally vote for a left-of-center party because of their demographics, economic needs. So what we need is a group of people, before we even get a party like Glod's come up with. That's, I think they're thinking, they're trying to jump to stage 3 without understanding that the base comes first. You need a group of businessmen and women, investors, small to medium business owners. Gather those up together. Begin pooling resources to create jobs that make people buy their own homes and create property companies which serve the interests of Welsh people apart from the holiday home and tourist sector, which the Tories, they focus on that incessantly because it wins them votes in certain areas from areas where there is an English majority in Wales. But if we enable Welsh people to become property owners and focus on that as a group, have a group doing that first, and then have the goal of that group to establish a party in the future once it has built that base. The party comes second. The demographic base comes first, and the reason we are not able to dislodge labor is because we're not thinking in terms of changing our demographics before we change our politics. We're stuck in this antiquated mid-20th century class divide, frozen in time at the point when Thatcher ripped out the industry. And we're unable to move on because we haven't built any white-collar, professional, upper-middle class bourgeoisie of our own. I don't mean an upper-middle class, technocratic, progressivist, morality-preaching, socially center-left view. No, I mean economic aspiration capitalist of viewpoint. Some social conservatism, but not crazy, right? I mean, England's got enough of that. Don't transport that here, please. I don't want your culture war, right? I mean, we're Welsh. We're not crazy. That's the thing. We Welsh are really decent, moderate, calm people. It's no coincidence that our language, Wirigoraisi, has survived. Because you have to be staunchly small c conservative to have kept your language in the face of the whole British Empire next door to them. That takes some serious conservatism. And Labour, they've sniffed that. They've kept advancing onto Plaid's doorstep, Plaid Cymru, adding in more Welsh here, there, using more Welsh when appropriate. Very pragmatic. I respect that kind of Machiavellian, prudent behavior. I appreciate it. But that's the point. Labour are doing their job, and the rest of us are not. Plaid Cymru is not being in opposition. It's being an assistant. Which I understand. You want a bit of power. You want to change things. I understand. I'm not unforgiving. But God will forgive you. Maybe I won't. I don't know yet. So if any of you, like me, are business owners, small business owners, investors, just of the same mind, let's get in touch. We need some kind of group to begin talking how we can offer a credible, right-of-center Welsh voice that's not into conspiracy theories, that's not about the culture war, that's built on getting our people out of this poverty-ridden slum mentality with the power of capitalism and the hope that it brings our people. Because capitalism is the best system that has ever been invented. It works. Nothing brings prosperity and happiness like getting off your butt and having to get a job and reaching it and obtaining it. Nothing. And the apathy I see in our country, it breaks my heart. Because Labour understands that if it puts a new banking centre in Merthyr Tydfil, within 15 years they're not going to vote Labour. If you replace call centres, that kind of cheap labour, with insurance companies, aviation, technological advancement, companies seeking procurements. These things are going to lift people out of poverty in ways that we've never seen before. It's going to make them more respectable. It's going to make them more conservative, less wanting to rock the boat. But ironically, in Wales's case, that will rock the boat, because the boat in Wales is left of centre. And after a century of these kinds of values, you cannot be revolutionary in Wales from the left anymore. You just can't. And that's what I'm worried about. I don't want these anti-Welsh devolution people to win. I don't want people to threaten our existence as a nation, because if we lost our Senedd, not making our own laws, swallowed into England, no real free will as a collective culture of our own. And I don't like the word collective. I don't use it lightly. But we are a nation. And we have a conscious awareness of that. And these people who see that Labour's not offering us any better, they're right. But not in the way that they think. Labour, there are hundreds, thousands of really decent, good people in the Labour Party. Many who I've met who I have been very fond of. But if we have a situation where they never lose power, and only one kind of economic morality and policy is in power, we'll never get white-collar traditional jobs billowing up. We'll never get entrepreneurs and investors, nor a banker type. My wrist click, am I getting old? Nor a banker type economy. And those jobs, those attitudes are what lifts people out of poverty best. There's time for left wing. When you get too rigid, when you get too hard, it's good to have a dose of the caring left, right? But if you're too soft, if you're too nice, if you have too many public jobs, then your people are in poverty. Then your people have apathy. Then you're not a go-getter nation. Then you're not building. You're not aspiring. You're not hoping. You're in the doldrums. You're stagnant. Your chapels are rotting. That's what we see in Wales today. So if you have the same mind as me, write me. Let's talk. Let's build a group. Our country needs some kind of hope. Something new. Where we can go on doing what we've always done and see if it changes. And that's how we save Welsh devolution. Now maybe the people will vote Plaid Cymru and they'll go through a few of their changes. Or maybe the people will vote Tories and they'll be so happy that they're in power that they'll want to use it to show they can do things differently than Labour. But can we really afford to wait for either of those two events? Our country needs something, anything other than Labour except the abolish Wales people. And they're gaining ground, so we need to come together. See you next time. Llywelyn.